All right, guys. So we're talking about domain authentication, deliverability, and your sender reputation, specifically if you're sending out campaigns. Even if you're not, even if you're just a service-based business, you still need to worry about these and set this up properly. So let's get into what this means. So why does this matter, right? Deliverability and all this other setup that we just talked about. So it's primarily inbox placement. So when you're sending out emails, you want to make sure your campaigns are landing in the inbox of your recipient. Otherwise, what's the point? So deliverability determines the inbox placement, not just sending the volume. I'm going to send 50,000 emails to my subscribers and they're all going to get it. Not necessarily. Okay. It all matters how your reputation is, your sender domain, etc., and your records, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records, which we'll talk about. Sounds gibberish, but they're important. They're one-time setup. So sender trust, right? Domain authentication is the foundational sender trust to avoid being put in the spam or junk folder by the recipient's email provider. And then revenue growth, right? Strong sender reputation means you could send, when you're sending your volume campaigns, your emails, they're actually going to land in the inbox. Okay, your customer base is going to see your emails. They're going to click. They're going to open. Right? Chances are high you're going to have higher sales because you have a good sending reputation. Deliverability 101. All right. So again, where your emails are landing after being sent. So the major factors that affect your inbox placement, right? This is very important. So again, domain reputation, your IP reputation, that's IP address, not intellectual property. IP reputation, and that matters whether you're using your own static IP that you've paid for and it's for your specific company, or you're sharing it, which is what most brands do, using a shared IP from Klaviyo, from MailChimp, or whichever platform, right? So the IP reputation matters. And content quality, right? Engagement, the opens and clicks that they see happening on your account when you're sending your campaigns. Bounce rates, spam complaints, things like that. And then the consistency of your sending pattern, right? You're sending weekly, every week consistently, or you're sending weekly this month, and then next month it's every day, and then the next month it's like once a month, you forgot to send it. So that cadence matters. So what is a domain authentication? So these are a set of DNS-based records. You set these up in your DNS provider account, wherever you registered the actual domain name, whatever.com, right? And so the whole point is to reduce the spoofing and to boost trust, etc. And Klaviyo supports these three records. These are pretty standard in the world, I should say. You need these three records to set, and also not only do you need them to be set up properly. Sometimes you could have incorrect setup of these. Sometimes I've seen clients have 2 SPF records. You can only have 1 of each of these, okay? SPF is a sender policy framework. That's what that stands for. And so it just tells the receiver which servers are allowed to send email on your behalf, your domain's behalf. So if your emails are hosted by Google, for example, you have a Google Workspace account, Google's sending those emails. And if you happen to pick one of those emails and put it in Klaviyo and say, this is my sending email for all my correspondence, all my campaigns, everything, then you need to set this SPF record and DKIM and DMARC and all that based on Google's setup, and then you can add Klaviyo into these records. And I'll show you what that looks like. DKIM basically uses cryptographic signatures, basically saying that your domain, like the email that you sent, was not altered in its path. So someone didn't open your content, your email, alter the contents, and then send it on its way to the recipient, right? So they want to make sure nothing happened from send to receive. That's what DKIM proves or assures. And then DMARC record is basically telling the mailbox providers, Yahoo's, MSN's, Google's, what to do with the email that fails the SPF and the DKIM record. It says basically send a report to this specific email address. And you want to pay attention to those. A lot of times you'll keep getting these like weekly. It's annoying, but you every once in a while pay attention and just open and see what's in there. But that's also required. So branded sending domain setup in Klaviyo, right? So in Klaviyo, so settings, email domains, add a branded domain. So if you're in, let me get out of here, and under settings, account, and then domains, right? So if you want a branded sending domain, which is highly recommended, you first have to set up this in your DNS, right? So it'll be like something like send.whateveryourdomain.com, okay? And so you just click on add domain, In this particular example, it's my dummy domain here that I'm playing with. You type the domain name here, the root. You don't want to put anything in front of it, like www, none of that stuff, just the actual root. And then you're going to say, okay, sending domain. Typically it's send or email. I go with send most of the time. So it'll be like send.mardilab.com. And then it's going to give you the records. Okay, so then here, if you connect with this, you could. A lot of times this is pretty easy and fast. It'll ask you to log on to your DNS provider, etc. But let me show the manual. So manually, let's say your GoDaddy, Cloudflare, Shopify, Ionos, etc. Let's just say GoDaddy. Let's see what this does. So these are the records, right? So these are manually, you have to click on this, copy it, log on to your DNS provider, go to the DNS settings and manually set them up as a CNAME type of record. The name is going to be send, and then you paste this value that you copied, and then see another CNAME, another one, and a text record. So these are very important. You don't want to just copy these. You want to click and copy them because the records have to exactly match. Otherwise, it's not going to pass. But if you go back and you say connect with entry, so this will basically allow Klaviyo to log in to your DNS provider and automatically start entering all those records for you, so you don't have to manually do it. All right, so I'm not going to do it here, but you can go ahead and play with that. So static versus dynamic, we talked about it. It just affects how DNS is applied, but they both authenticate SPF and DKIM records. So we already saw the 3 CNAMEs plus the text record. So there's 4 records for Klaviyo when you're setting up your sending domain, so that it's not a Klaviyo domain when it's sending it out. It's your actual domain, which is better for branding and trust and all that stuff. All right, so let's go on to the next slide here. So the SPF record, what is it and why does it matter? SPF says which host can actually send email for your domain. So in this example, we have Google, right? So it just prevents forged sending or phishing attacks, right? And without an SPF, your emails might actually end up in spam, or most of the time they get rejected sometimes too by the email providers. So and Klaviyo automatically includes SPF records when you authenticate your branded domain, which is what we just saw, right? So SPF1, so V equals SPF1. It's like weird language or whatever this looks like, but declares that this is an SPF record. So version equals SPF1. There must always be, this piece of it must always be in the beginning. So V equals SPF1 and then whatever comes after it. Then we have include. In this instance, it's the Klaviyo SPF record, right? So authorizes Klaviyo infrastructure to send on your behalf, because you'll be sending campaigns. And even though Google's hosting your email, actual email, but it is still coming from Klaviyo. So SPF says Klaviyo is authorized to send on my domain's behalf. So Klaviyo has to be in the record. And then Google is also sending on your behalf. Your regular correspondence with your friends, your colleagues, outside world, you send an email. Google is actually routing that email, right? So Google has to be in the record, obviously. So they're first, and then Klaviyo second. And there's just a space in between. And then there's a space after .com, tilde, all, right? So the all is a soft tail for any sender not listed above, basically is not authorized. This is an absolute must. You have to have this set up. DKIM. So this attaches a digital signature. We talked about this earlier, so that nothing was altered in its way. The message from sender to recipient, nothing happened in between, right? And so typical host name is Google dot whatever underscore domain key or domain.com. And your domain obviously is your actual domain. It could be msn.com, it could be whatever. And then the value, right? And so this value that you see, version equals DKIM1, declares DKIM version, and there's always a DKIM version 1. The K equals RSA, it's the cryptographic algorithm that it's using. And the P is public. So this is the public key that you will typically get this from your Google admin. So you go to admin.google.com, log on with your main admin account if you're a workspace user. And then in the settings, maybe another video I could show you guys where to go, but you get this, you enable DKIM, you enable SPF records and all that, and then you get the key from there. This P equals. It's a longer thing. It's not that, but it's just a longer key. And then you take those and then you set them up in your DNS record. And then finally, DMARC. So it just adds another layer of security and just basically controls how unauthenticated emails are handled, right? So host name, and then it's got a value, the version of DMARC 1, declares a DMARC version, P equals none, policy instruction. So it's monitor only or no blocking. For example, none means no blocking, just monitor. A lot of times your DMARC record might be, when you're checking your DMARC record, it'll complain, oh, you haven't set up, the policy instructions haven't been set up because it's set to none. It'll work, but a lot of times, a lot of these providers, email providers, want to see something more restrictive than that, than just none. And so you've got another one that says quarantine, which is sent to spam folder, or reject, block entirely. Obviously, reject is the most strictest. Quarantine's in the middle. None is absolutely don't do anything, just inform. And then you have your RUA, mail to, email address. So instead of DMARC at your domain, obviously you're going to put, I don't know, like some kind of an email address where all of the reports are going to be emailed to, daily summaries of mailbox providers showing the pass fail trends, like what's happening in your domain when you're sending out emails. This isn't just for Klaviyo campaigns. This is for any type of email being sent out by your business. So you'll get like a report of what's happening. RUF, this is the forensic fail report. So where should we send anything that's failed? So failure events, less common now, but you still should have this set up. What email? Typically it's the same email that you have your RUA. And then FO equals 1. The reporting option sends reports if either SPF or DKIM fails. It's just used for diagnostics and just looking at what's happening with your actual domain. Everything's fine. You just get these reports and they're going to be generic, nothing crazy in them, boring. But if there's something wrong and they're sending it to you, pay attention to it and take a look, because your domain, you don't want your domain to be not taken over, but like somebody figuring out that you're not very strict with your records and they actually alter and send out phishing spam emails to your customer base. Okay, so then how do you verify authentication for your own domain? So you could use one of these two links if you want. I'm actually at the DMARC.com. So if I wanted to check my DKIM record, I put my domain.com. And since I know I'm hosted on Google, I'll just type Google. But if you don't know, you could just say detect all selectors and it'll switch to auto this way. It'll just find everything, but I know it's Google. And so I'm going to hit check. Doing a little funky stuff here, but this is the actual record, right? This is the whole DKIM record. Again, you could go to tools, you could check your DMARC record checker, you could come down and do, where is it, SPF record check and lookup. You could generate records here too, but generally speaking, this is for people who actually know what each record should say, but you can get your records, like I said, from Google if you're hosted by Google. If you're hosted elsewhere, the provider, whoever's handling your emails for your actual domain, can provide this information too. All right. So sender reputation. So what is a sender reputation? So it's basically a score, right? Like your credit score, right? You're a human being, you have a credit score in the United States, or just basically the behavior, right? What's been your sending habits? What kind of content you're sending out? Are people actually engaging with your material? And so it influences your engagement, your bounce rate, spam complaints, unsubscribe rates, and sending consistency. All of this stuff matters, and it all affects the reputation, right? So high engagement by your subscriber base means you have a strong reputation, right? If you get bounces and spam reports from people who you're sending out, maybe they really didn't sign up for your newsletter or whatever. You bought some accounts from somewhere. They don't even know who you are. That's really bad. Don't do that. Because all of that stuff, it's just people hitting spam or not even engaging, just deleting or marking as spam. All of that is going to hurt your reputation. You don't want to do that. So deliverability is best practices, right? From technical standpoint, we just talked about the SPF, DKIM, DMARC records. Make sure they're set up. Make sure they're done correctly. Go to these sources and check, make sure everything's correct. Number 2 is list hygiene, which we just talked about right now. Send it to people who have actually signed up for your content. They've opted in, but also they've opted in with an email address that's valid, right? And so if you're getting bounce rates and things like that from emails you're sending out to people and they're just like fake accounts or whatever, you want to get rid of them, flush them out of your system, or take a look at it. Maybe it's just misspelled something. Look, instead of .com, it's .co. Something happened there. But list cleanup is really important. So yeah, remove any invalid and unengaged email. People who aren't engaging at all, they're not opening, they're not clicking, put them in a different segment. They're not part of your routine send. And then you could have a targeted email campaign just for them to re-engage and bring them and have them become a first-time customer, for example. And so number 3 is content and frequency. We talked about this a little bit. Avoid spammy triggers like in the subject or in the body of your campaigns. You want to send content to your segments who are engaged with you. You want to send content that's relevant to them, right? All of that stuff matters. So content and then frequency. Like if you're on weekly cadence of email, stick to weekly. If you're going to be like once a month and then next month it's 4 or 5 emails in 1 week or something like that, obviously that's inconsistent, right? So you want to be consistent. So stick to a regimen. And number 4 is monitoring, right? So Klaviyo Deliverability Hub, you can go to the dashboard on Klaviyo and you could see how your deliverability is. What's the health of your reputation, right? And take action. If you see that it's declining, something's wrong, right? Look and see what's going on. Are there a lot of bounce rates? Are there people just not engaging? It's being delivered, right? Your deliverability rate is okay, but the engagement sucks. And so you have to look at all that stuff. You can't just ignore it. You want to track your open click rates, but you mostly want to track the engagement, right? And then the conversion and stuff. What's the return? What's the return per recipient, right? You want to keep an eye on the bounce rates as well, as we just mentioned earlier. And all of this, all these 4 points are things that you should implement and keep an eye on and pay attention to. So troubleshooting, like common issues, touched on this, but you've authenticated, everything looks clean, but still landing in the spam. It's really frustrating, I know, but then you want to look at your list quality. We just mentioned that, but check the content triggers. Look at what's happening and what kind of content you're sending out, who you're sending out. Again, the list quality, and then the DMARC misalignment. If the SPF or DKIM pass, but your DMARC is not set up properly, that could also, like mine, you noticed it was complaining about my DMARC being too lenient with the P equals none. If I've been having problems, I would go and change that and make it like quarantine, for example. And a lot of times, a lot of these providers look for all 3, DMARC, SPF, and DKIM, to be 100% green checked, like everything's spiffy. If at least DMARC is off, but the other 2 records are okay, they're going to treat you a little differently, right? Your emails. So these are 3 things that you could check if you're still landing in the spam folder. And a little bit of homework. Go again, check your domain authentication stuff. Monitor your deliverability rate in every week in Klaviyo and look and see what's going on, and adjust your DMARC policy we just mentioned from perhaps none to quarantine. See if that helps. It's just going to be constantly every week, every 2 weeks. You have to keep an eye on this stuff until you figure out what's actually causing the issue. But that's about it. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.